Yeah.
I'll camera off.
Feel like starting by saying dearly beloved with a Gary here today, which I won't do. But yeah, so this is the climax of a week of talks. Hope everybody's enjoyed it so far, and we sort of try to save the best till last. So what we have here, and hopefully it'll work quite well, we have three creative directors. We have Keith Noble from 4 Point, director at 4 Point Preston, Gary Holt, founder and creative director at Someone London, and we have JP Sykes, creative director, Frank Brighton Able, and I think, and obviously Rachel Mosley and myself.
And me, yes.
Yes, Rachel, myself. So it's 3 directors, 1 tutor, and a fake vicar. Yeah, so I'm going to get them to introduce themselves a little bit, but by my reckoning, probably well over 80 to 100 years worth of industrial experience.
Hey, steady on.
It's not that old.
We're about to share with everybody. So yeah. Do you want to say anything, Keith?
Yeah, hello everybody. Yeah, I'm Keith Noble. I'm director of 4 Point. I graduated in 1990. Yeah, long time ago. My track record is working at David Davis Associates in London on placement. Went to the Chase, Horseman Cook, Tyndrum, and then ended up at 4 Point and have been there ever since.
Thank you, Gary.
Sure. Yeah, Gary Holt. Hello. Founder of an agency called Someone. We have an agency in London. We have one in Sydney, one in New York, although that's closed because of COVID. I was in the same year as Keith, so again, another ex-Preston student who graduated in 1990. I had actually the privilege of hiring JP when we come to introduce him. As Keith did his bit of introduction, so I was creative director of an agency called Lambinaine for some 12 years, I think, before setting up my own agency, Someone.
JP.
Hello. Yep, so I graduated slightly later, so 10 years later in 2000. And yeah, as Gary said, he offered me my first job very kindly at Lambinaine and worked there for a while. The Chase, it was the place I was at on placement during my sort of sandwich course. So I experienced both of those. Worked at places like SAS, Addison, Turquoise, but now creative director at Frank Brighton Able, a brand communications consultancy in London. That's me.
We have Rachel Mosley, who probably needs no introduction.
Yeah, well, just a little bit from me as well. I mean, if you don't know, then Andy was in the first year when I was in the 4th year. Gary and Keith were 2 years below me, I think you were. And then John Paul, I actually taught you. I did 1 year of teaching, and then I left to go back into industry. So that was in 98 to 99, incredibly. So yes, I've been knocking around a bit. And we'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much. I'm just about to share my screen, so hopefully everybody will be able to see the desktop. Can we see the desktop?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okie dokie. Let's try that again. There we go. So yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to go. I'll just go to the first slide, and hopefully everybody can see this. Oh, sorry. There we go. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's Back to the Future a little bit. We're going to show you 1 or 2 little things, but they're prompts mainly to talk about some key aspects of the course. So I think the network is what we're going to talk about first, and I think that everybody's familiar with the front of Victoria Building, but over the years, and we found this is Gary and Keith's year, the class of 1990, and I don't know if you can see there's Keith there at the back, and Gary just below him there. So have you got anything to say about that picture at all, guys?
No.
Well, other than clearly not changed. Oh, sorry.
I haven't changed a bit, have they?
So the class of 91, that was my year there. Claire Parker at the back would give a talk on the Monday next to Neil. And then I managed to find one of the class of 90.
Oh, Andy, you had Simon in there as well.
Sorry,
The
Simon.
previous one.
There's Simon.
Yay.
Oh, yeah.
Got with white hair. And then we also, I'm sorry, I'll come back to this in a minute, but and then 94, which is very out of focus. But yeah, 1 or 2 people in there as well. But going back to Keith and Gary, that's a picture of Keith and Gary on the Amsterdam trip, I believe.
Yeah, 1988, I think.
88. And then we have one of you guys probably in Amsterdam again.
Mm-hmm.
And then I must show this one of JP here with White Lightning or some drinking cider.
Yeah, there I'm in my house in Preston. There we go.
A quality brew.
After university lectures, of course.
Have I stopped sharing there?
Yes.
Good. Well, which we use those. Just so we're going to talk a little bit about networking. So I don't know who wants to start about the importance of the network. I mean, I'll just finish in a minute. But I think one of the things we talked about was about the closest network you've got is the one that is in the Victoria Building.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that. I mean, shall I start?
Yeah.
I think that's the most. When we talked about this before, we ended up every time we've had this conversation, we've ended up bookending every conversation with the network of ex-Preston students, the connections you make, the fact that, I mean, even just the way we're joking on this call, Keith is perhaps the reason I've started is Keith's story is even more impressive than mine and ours, I think, in terms of probably the network. And I know it's tricky because of COVID, we're not in studio, but the network that is around everyone on this call is probably more connected than we all realise. So we all have this focus that the job's out there. You know, the job is somewhere in the distance. I don't know how to get it. I've just got to go apply and I've got to send emails. Actually, half the way of getting that job is based on the network of people around you. There is going to be someone who knows somebody in and around the people you know. I mean, it literally is as simple as that. So if you start that way, so for example, Ellie, we've just offered Ellie a job. Ellie Spickett, I'm not sure if you know her. Connor, who I've also been talking to, I'm trying to get him a job at somewhere else. Connections I've made via JP, etc. I mean, it's the department of bleeding obvious, but do not ignore it. Do not ignore the people around you. I mean, like I say, sorry, I've completely pulled the rug from Keith because his story, I think, is even more connected.
No, I think what we've been talking about, it's all the same, but it's all relevant. I mean, we were chatting last night, and my Preston story started before I even knew where Preston was. And that was on a foundation course in Sunderland. And I just remembered I went to a little gallery and there was a display of work. And one of the pieces of work was by Martin Chatterton, which I'd completely forgotten about. And then one of the lecturers on the course was a guy called Charlie. And he was mates with a guy, John Hoddy, who was one of the lecturers at Preston. He said, go to Preston. It's a great course. You'll love graphic design. Go away and do it. And my journey started there. So before I even knew about the Preston connection and the relationships, that's where it started. And of course, the first person I met was Simon Bailey, who was our lecturer. Simon was our MD, so it's gone full loop. So from Simon, it went to Stuart Barron, who was an ex-Preston. That's where I did my placement at David Davis in London. Then Simon Bailey introduced me to Ben Casey, got my first job at the Chase. I met Steve Glennon. Steve Glennon left the Chase, set up a couple of businesses. I went with him, and then full circle back to Simon Bailey, and we carry on doing 4 Point. And in that little graphic there, I was literally my own benefit there. I was looking at the kind of the marks that have been made on me by other people and other instances and other opportunities and that network. And you might not be able to see, but on the right hand side there's a list of names which at the bottom corner, and they are the people that currently, who are Preston graduates, are working in our business. And that's not exhaustive, because there's been all the students over the years, and I would argue people that haven't been to Preston, who are part of our business, have the same culture and the same mindset and know the same sort of groups of people. So it is just, you can't express enough, like Gary said, that kind of network. You've got to go and discover it, but you are part of it. And it's just hugely important, and it's hugely part of what we're about as a business.
Yeah. And you'll probably end up working with people from Preston as well, because I mean, I've worked with both Keith and Andy at the Chase.
Yes.
So you meet up with each other again en route, don't you?
Yeah. So be nice to each other.
Yes.
JP, have you got anything to say about the network?
Well, yeah, I think there's three aspects to it, really. Firstly, your tutors. Obviously, I would say that they're on here. They were my tutors as well. But Andy obviously got me my placement through his connections at the Chase. I did a year there. That was absolutely the making of me as a designer. Secondly, obviously, the ex-students network. So obviously, once I graduated, as Gary's already said, Gary ex-Preston offered me my first job. So there's the wider network there as well. But yeah, finally, the people that you work with, your co-students and colleagues at university, because that picture of me drinking White Lightning. So the chap in the middle, he was my best friend at uni, so Robin, and he's went off and started an agency. His and my agencies now are part of the same network. And then within my own agency ourselves, we always look for that Preston University on people's CVs. So myself and Janet, we're creative directors. We're both ex-Preston. Design director Helen, she's ex-Preston. We continue to take placements on from Preston every year when we can. So yeah, it's 6 degrees of separation. You will always know somebody who's from Preston or went to Preston, or know somebody who knows somebody from Preston. So
Guy pushing through mid.
The whole career, basically.
Yeah.
Can I just add from my point as well? Sorry, I'm just going to butt in here as somebody who didn't go to Preston, but obviously now works here. I was kind of before I joined Preston, I was aware of it. I knew it had a great reputation, but I had absolutely no idea quite the roots that Preston had. And I've been here for 15 years now, and I'm staggered by I've never come across anywhere else. I mean, I've not worked in that many educational institutions, but I've not come across anywhere else that has anything like this. And I think, you know, for students, it's blown me away. And, you know, every conference week, I'm always kind of staggered by the kind of the family vibe and the fact that people want to come back. And I think, you know, as a student, to really relish that and really tap into it is, you know, it's only when you leave, I think, that you realize what you've got. So if you can kind of tap into that now, you really are, you know, you're on a pretty special course in many respects. I'll shut up now and let you guys.
We're going to move on to, thank you, John, that's brilliant. We're going to move on to influences now, I think. I'm going to share my screen again, and the guys are going to talk through some of their influences when they were students, with our first influences. Everybody can see. Can everybody see influences? I think they can.
We can.
So maybe Gary, and I'll flick through Gary when you want to tell me to.
Okay, I mean, this is a slight cheat because the exam question was influences whilst we were still at uni, and this has actually probably changed the year I left. So it's, again, I was has a Preston connection. I was actually hired by the late great Martin Lambinaine, who has been eternally a great friend of mine, who died sadly on Christmas Day. So I moved into a world of televisual branding. So I'm not sure, again, if you know the history. I did all the BBC Twos covered in paint and the BBC One balloons, etc. But this for me was groundbreaking. Is there another slide after this? I'm not sure. So just very briefly, because I know it's a case study that probably all of you or many of you might know. But at the time, music videos obviously were exploding, and the concept of doing graphic design or branding was all about essentially creating a logo and being incredibly consistent and putting on everything in exactly the same place, like you're a bank, on the top of the letterhead, etc. And seeing this project just totally blew my mind of what is possible, because what you take is a core idea, but you can express it in a multitude of different ways. I mean, an endless number of ways. And I just didn't think it was possible. And then just the end punchline to this, and probably I'm not over, it's probably not hyperbole, that I really did start to question what I had been thinking was graphic design and branding before, because it was so flexible. And the end punchline is, if just on the right hand side below that key line, so above the key line is MTV as it was actually created in, I think, 1990, 1991. Below that line is the new MTV that was created, started in 2019 and launched in 2020. So that has lasted. I mean, identities you expect to last 10, 20 years in some that has literally gone full circle, gone right back to this concept of what's called an infill strategy. Take a shape, fill it in. They've shortened it because I don't know why, it looks rubbish. It needs to be the same shape. Don't know why they changed it. Shortened it so it's a fat N. But the idea was, in terms of influences, the idea that something so radical could basically flex something so simple. Yes, that's me.
Keith.
This is my one. Yeah, slightly different to Gary, but I think the reason this influenced me, I remember this popping up while I was at Polytechnic, as we called it back then, and this was the first realization for me, a penny drop moment, that this was done by an ex-Preston student. This was a national and I suppose arguably international identity that was done by a person that was trained and educated at Preston. And it was this, it suddenly turned from this, doing this course that was academic, which said, this is a job. This is a proper job, the way you can do real things and people can see what you're doing. And what's lovely about this one, you know, it was the simple idea, the dots and the dashes, the Morse code. And it was just, and it's still to this day, man, Andy, you've got the next slide, haven't you, where you probably won't even notice this, but it's still around us because it's embedded in a lot of the actual infrastructure that sits in our kind of environments. And it's just a really simple idea of this kind of Morse code element. And I just remember it sticking in my head. And it was that transition between this is education and this is actually going to be a real job. And this can happen from somebody that has been trained in Preston. So it kind of, I sort of sparked my kind of ambition to realize that I can actually do this and it is possible. And I just thought it was just a really nice, simple one, but lovely touch, that one. I like that. I like that little metal plate. So you have to go looking out for those now. They're everywhere.
Yeah, I'll be keeping a beady eye out for those.
JP.
Yeah, so a book, would you believe it? So yeah, back in the day, we didn't have the internet, would you believe? So our inspiration wasn't going on Pinterest or whatever, design inspiration websites. It was physical books. You know, it was magazines as well, things like Creative Review that, you know, still around today. But primarily sort of design books was the thing that I used to really, really love looking at. When I was at uni, and the absolute Bible for me was this, which is Smiling the Mind. So the original one on the left there. So I don't know if you've got this book, but you should get this book because to me it's absolutely timeless. You know, the ideas and the thinking in there are as clever and as you know, impactful today as they were back then. So I would urge you all to get that if you haven't already got it. So yeah, the fact that we only have books to look in rather than the internet is one thing, but also I think, you know, in terms of, and I know we're getting onto philosophy later, you know, that idea of the thought and the concept and the idea being everything, that is exactly what this book is all about. And really, you know, me looking through that as a student, looking at the type of agencies that would create that type of work. So things like the Chase and Pentagram and the Partners and CDT and those type of people, that just made me think those are the type of agencies I want to work for because we've got a similar philosophy. And I suppose the reason one on the right is there, that's a reprint or a new edition of Smiling the Mind that came out a few years ago. And I suppose talk about making marks and things and coming full circle, I was lucky enough to have one of my ideas in that new edition. So yeah, for me, you know, being inspired by that at university to come all the way through, those ideas and thoughts, you know, still resonate just as strongly today, I think.
Yeah. Oh, I've got one to add.
Oh yeah.
I have. No, I was kind of called in rather late, so I haven't got a visual for it. But one thing that I was really inspired by when I was a student was the Face magazine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely amazing magazine because there wasn't really an awful lot to look at the time. So yes, it was quite early days, but the typography was inspirational, unique, groundbreaking. Neville Brody was the designer on the Face, and everybody used to race to the library on the day that it would be brought in, and we were all looking at it. But yeah, I don't know whether whether you've all heard of the Face, but it was iconic at the time. So that's my contribution.
Is that okay? The visual there? Have you got the visual?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. And yeah, I took the liberty of putting a couple in, and it sort of segues into JP's. I think Smiling the Mind. First time I sort of saw the one on the left, the Chase one. The idea of looking at it, what's going on there, and then just not quite getting it, and then suddenly realising the two black eyes and the boxing connection. And I just loved the wit and the thought behind it, and the Bowater one by the Partners as well. Again, I just love I love the little ripple at the bottom with the shape of the bow and the water. I can't remember what it was for, but again, two agencies who are both ideas based and top of the game really. But yeah, just that's that really, I think. So yeah, I'm just going to unshare that now again. So yeah, that was a little bit of influences, wasn't it? And then I think we're going to have a little bit of a look at some work.
Ooh.
Hold on a minute. Now then, this could. I'll just share my screen again. So yeah, I'll go to the desktop. So work.
Old work.
Old work. And we asked some of our. We asked everybody to contribute a little bit of their work. I can't remember who's first. I think it's Gary.
Oh, I'm first. Yeah. Well, JP's already explained, and it's very tricky not to get nostalgic, but clearly we didn't have computers. There was no internet, so everything had to be hand set. You can see, actually, I went to great struggle to try and find these in the loft. These are all bromide. That's why they've all gone a bit brown. They were a layout for an annual report for the RSPB that I actually did even bother sending off to the RSPB, and it was the time when actually they did write back to me. They weren't interested, but they did write back to me. But why have I shown this? So this was part of my degree show. As I mentioned, I was examined by Martin Lambinaire. He was our external examiner. And he was interested in the typography, but I mean, he was a television designer. And his question was, really like the illustrations, where are they from? And I had that slightly peculiar moment where, do I blag it? I spend half my time not letting the truth get in the way of a good story. So I thought, this is the chance where I go, clearly I'm great at painting, clearly. And I thought, no, I should be honest. I didn't realise how religious he was, by the way, Reverend Bainbridge. But I said, no, I actually just got all my mates. In fact, a number of them, Rachel from your year, I think, I just got all my mates to draw all the things I needed them to draw. And that was one of the key for him in particular. He just said, well, actually, really pleased you said that, because part of the art of design is pulling in the expertise of those people who have a skill that you don't have. You're not going to be able to animate everything. You're not going to be able to do three-dimensional everything. You're not going to be able to paint. So there's no expectation. Actually, the best designers and best creative directors are those who are able to orchestrate and bring together the skills of others. So took a gamble, like I say, went for honesty. So it's actually less about, and yes, it does go a bit like a parable, it does go a bit like a story, but I still remember really, really fondly, because Martin Lambinaire used to refer to this, the idea that you are able, thanks to the network we were describing before, to pull in the influences of other people. Don't feel you have to do it yourself. When someone like a creative director like myself or Keith or JP, etc., asks, who did this? Don't be ashamed of saying, no, we worked on as a team. It's not just me. I use the strengths of other people. I mean, occasionally I was actually even slightly scared because someone, Keith was, by the way, a superb designer. Did he give you the heebie-jeebies with some of his ideas? Yes. But the fact that you recognize that is half the skill. So, end of parable.
Well, I'm just going to add to that, actually, Gary, because it's really interesting. I remember having a conversation with my mum, God bless her soul. And I remember showing my first bit of work I did when I got a proper job, and it was a brochure I did while I was at the Chase, and I showed her that. You know what mums are like; they just think that everything you do is amazing. And I remember she looked at this and she looked at the cover and she went, "Oh, did you do that drawing on the front?" I went, "Oh no, we've got an illustrator to do that." And she said, "All right, okay." She opened the inside and there's all these photographs of all these amazing things in there. She said, "Oh, did you take all them pictures?" And I went, "No, I didn't do that." And then she was reading through. She said, "Did you write all the copy and all the words that are in it?" I said, "No, I didn't do that." And she just looked at me and I knew exactly what she was thinking. She goes, "What did you do?" And it was a bit like, and it was that moment that, like Gary says, that illustrates it, that you aren't doing all of those things necessarily. You're just that curator or kind of editor of it. Yeah. And it was just a little story just popped in my head that.
Well, it's so true. I mean, we need to move on to someone else. But I mean, again, just in terms of this, because of the audience, I have interviewed lots of people from Preston. I've interviewed lots of people from other areas. There is a slight nervousness when you ask them who did what. Did you work on this as a team? Or I suppose all I was saying here is don't be shy. Embrace that. Run with it. Say actually you pulled in the right expertise in the right time.
Yeah.
Exactly, and we all work that way in the industry. Nobody does anything on their own. Design and communication is a team sport. We all work together, so there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. But this is me. Yeah. Well, speaking of doing everything on your own, I decided to have a go at that. This is just a really simple brief we were getting. It was a phobia. I can't even remember whether it was first or second year. Might have been a first year brief, but it was set by Martin Chatterton, who was obviously on one of the earlier talks this week. And you can see the sort of inspiration, but it was just a piece of illustration, just again, it's just a simple idea. You don't need to explain it. It just is what it is. And I think we've all talked about the simplicity and what JP was talking about, smile in the mind. They're all just beautiful things that you just get it. And I think it's lovely when that happens. And I just a piece of work that I found. But the next one, Andy, is slightly cheaty. It's kind of post education. But this was the summer I got the job at the Chase, and I found this little sketch, this little drawing of a doodle, because the Chase were tasked with rebranding the Court Bank at the time. And this goes back to kind of just getting ideas down on paper, and don't overcomplicate, just write everything down, scribble it down, notebooks, whatever. Because, and I think Harry mentioned it yesterday, that sometimes your first ideas or your last ideas are the best ones. And this was the sketch before anything kind of, I've done any research or any of that. A little thing, it's not rocket science, and it's not, it's not going to set the world on fire, but just linking the two O's of cooperative. And it just basically stuck, and there was lots of iterations, and it ended up being the thing that held that kind of identity together for a while. And I just thought it was quite, the fact that I still had that little sketchbook, it just shows the transition of ideas from, essentially a concept or a little scribble doodle into something that's real. So it's kind of a little bit of a cheat, but it was close enough to education, I think, to count.
Yes, and just focuses on the importance of doodling.
Absolutely.
We'll forgive you that cheat, my son.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just getting interrupted.
I'm going to hell, mate.
This one's me, so I can talk about this. So obviously 3 years at uni. First 2 years I thought I'd done all right-ish. Luckily enough, Andy started and reinstated the sandwich course, which was brilliant for me, which meant I got to do a whole year out working at the Chase, which, as I said earlier, was totally the making of me, and turned me from somebody who didn't really know what they was doing into somebody who had some sort of half a clue. So basically, when I came back into the final year, our final project basically was a self-initiated brief. We could basically write our own brief, which firstly is a complete gift. You never get to do that. Obviously, we're not artists. You never get to do that post-education. So why not take that opportunity and go for it? So I wanted to do something that was just really, really ideas-based and just had a strong, hopefully, smile in the mind at the heart of it. So I wrote my own brief. Internet cafes were all the rage in those days. So I thought, why not? If there was an internet bar, what about that? So I came up with a name. So the name, the Space Bar. And I thought, why not just try and do a brand without any words whatsoever, just using computer keys. So we've got, obviously, there's the logo. It's just the space bar. On the next one, on the bill that you get, it's tab. On the next one, on the receipt, you just get the return key, because we want people to return and come back. And finally, if there's a little flyer, come and escape at the space bar. So actually being really, really reductive, and just thinking, challenging yourself and going, can I do a brand without words, was quite an interesting brief. So that's my project.
Thank you very much, JP.
Yeah, definitely minimalist.
Minimalist.
Very minimalist. Excellently clicked through.
Yes, thanks, Andy.
So I'm trying my best. So what we're doing now then? Oh, right, yes. Sorry, we're on to philosophy, which nobody can see. But I'm just going to share that now. We'll take some questions, obviously, at the end. I think if we took questions throughout, it might be a little bit chaotic. So in philosophy, we're just going to talk a little bit here. And this is thanks to Ben Atkins. I've lifted this from the reunion site, and he sort of found and extracted this paragraph from one of the 1 week briefs, or one of the early briefs. I think it might have been their famous person's hobby. So to pick a famous person and pretend they were a stamp collector or something like that. But what he spotted within it, and he said that really, in his little post, he said really they contained really the four core words that really sum up the course, really: wit, humour, unexpectedness, and imagination. That's kind of about, we're talking about the philosophy. And there's a couple of shots of here of some of the briefs as well. That sort of, the briefs are really important. The problems that we set you, the things that we get you to sort of introduce you to sort of the idea of creative thinking. Does anybody want to have a stab at the old idea of the philosophy of the course, or the impression that the briefs made on your ideas?
Well, I think you said the word there, Andy. I think it's ideas. And that's still, and I know everybody says this when they talk about Preston and talk about their experience, but ultimately that's what counts. Those ideas and the creation of ideas is what it's about. The execution follows through with that. And I think those words that you just highlighted then are important. The other ones were put together as connections and coincidences. So when you're looking for things, you've got a brief, you're trying to find ways to join either two subjects together or two things together to be able to tell a story. And I think that stays with you. It's a bit like it's like apprenticeship really that you have, and that philosophy does stay, and it stays to this day, and that's what we pass on. So again, as a culture, it's kind of the Preston way of doing things, I think.
Yeah, and that's what we're still doing in briefs now.
Yeah, even though that looks really, well, it is really old. It's a typewriter, but it doesn't matter because the principles are the same.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and just to add to that, I suppose the idea, not everything can have the smile in mind quality, and that doesn't mean to say it's not a good idea. Some ideas you get immediately, visually or from a piece of copywriting. You know, the black eyes is just that is the smile in the mind, where you don't need it explained to you. But that doesn't mean to say there's not some amazing concepts out there. And again, I'm sure this is repeating stuff you've all heard before, but there will be times when, if you're being interviewed or your identity or your work is being looked at and viewed by the public, it's all about context. So unless you can explain this is what the concept is, as in this is the history, this is what I was trying to do, you have to help them along in order to try and find the idea. So just presenting your work, it's like, well, I don't know, is that a bank? Is it a new fashion house? Is it a website? Is it a brand identity? Is it a design for a brochure or a leaflet? So just help particularly when you arrive in front of a creative director or someone who's interviewing you, just give them half the clue towards what this is. I decided to do a rebrand of this, or I decided to do packaging for this. The struggle was they are this. And then you go, now you told me that's a great idea. Yeah. So it's just that little bit of context, which I think is, I mean, again, it's straight back to the start of what I was mentioning before. It's the department of the obvious. But I tell you what, if you forget it, without context, some of the best ideas you just don't understand.
Yeah, and I think we were chatting yesterday, Gary, as well about execution. So you can have the best idea in the world, but if you cannot execute it well, sometimes they can just disappear into the ether or don't get picked up on. And that also about I suppose who's looking at those ideas. So that if we're talking about as a bunch of designers, we can look at scribbles, we can look at doodles, we can have conversations. So things don't need to be fully formed. But if you're presenting your ideas to an audience that need to understand a little bit more, to need to see how things can be executed, then you need to kind of rationalize that a little bit better and show it and be a bit slicker. And I think you used an example of a couple of students that if they've got the same project, how somebody's skill set can make their ideas come to life.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'd hate to think that turns into everyone has to be a Cinema 4D expert or everyone has to be able to use Live Surface and Photoshop, and because you don't, because a good idea should transcend anything. But unless you're, I mean, the problem is once you're in our commercial world, the majority of people we're presenting to are not trained like us. And again, I know that's obvious, but you have to take them on the journey. And if you can kind of go, I've got a great idea and it looks like this, then you've helped them along the way. Now, again, I am going to connect my other ideas. And if you can't do it, that's fine. Pull a favour for the sake of a few beers. Get someone who can do it for you. I mean, literally, that's what I spend my time doing now.
Yeah. I think if you were to sum it up, you've probably heard the phrase, but great ideas beautifully crafted, and that is a really great summation of it. And I think the important part is it's in that order. So you have to come up with the idea first. Something really clever at the heart of it. But
has somebody got their microphone on?
You got the panel. Sorry.
Yeah, if you could turn your microphone off, anybody who doesn't need to have it on.
Thank you.
Right.
Carry on.
Okay.
I think that was it.
Oh.
Finished then, JP.
No, just going back to the briefs just very quickly is just one anecdote. So I thought the 1 week briefs were just brilliant, and it was probably one of the first things that I did when I was at university. and I couldn't quite believe my luck, to be honest, because you know, to have such a fun conceptual ideas-based brief. So I remember my favourite one was pick a phrase out of a hat, you know, and I think I got to be or not to be. That was my phrase, and basically I had a whole week to come up with this, and I think it was in like the last 5 minutes before I had to hand it in. I thought, oh shit, but I better do something here. So I basically got 2 pencils, a HB pencil and a 2B pencil, and put it in an envelope, handed it in, and I got a first for that. So my classmates used to take the mickey out of me, and my flatmates even more, people who didn't do any creative subjects, saying, you literally just put 2 pencils in an envelope and got a first for that. What on earth is going on? I think that's at the heart of it. You know, if you've got a great idea, it's a great idea, and if it comes to you in the first 5 minutes or the last 5 minutes, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but the execution was excellent.
Can I ask a question? Because
the perfect pencils. Yeah, exactly.
Can I ask a question? Because obviously I didn't study there. So when you were first years for the first time and you were suddenly presented with these 1 week briefs, which were, I suppose, they were obviously conceptual, but they were abstract. They weren't necessarily about graphic design in context. What was your kind of first thoughts when you were presented with these to start with?
Sheer horror.
It was, oh shit, what am I going to do? It was terrifying.
Did it make sense to be doing them at that point, or was there that kind of, why are we doing this? What's the reason behind that? I'm just kind of curious, really.
No,
I had no
yeah.
idea what I was doing.
No, it didn't make much sense, really. It makes a lot of sense now. I don't really know at the time.
Can I interject? I think that the concept was that as long as one person knew what they were doing and just happened upon it, got it right, the tutors would go, this one's really good. And then everybody have to look at it and work out and analyse why it was really good. And then pennies started to drop. I mean, we've used the penny dropping thing already, and Keith's used it just by chance, and I was dropping pennies midweek, and people see whether people were getting the idea. But the concept of that is that it's a communal learning experience, and we're asking people to do something quite strange, I suppose, is think laterally.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, and really, and also just have to think.
Yeah.
You know.
Plus we hardly got any tuition on it either, and really it was the reliance of speaking to people in your group and discussing ideas with them. That's the only way that you could get through it. Plus an all-nighter the night before.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, but that is. I mean, I think it's singly the best thing that we did and that you do. I mean, it put the fear of God in us. You know, I remember even saying, I think when I was interviewing, it's 1 week brief, and I think it could have even been Martin Lambinaire with a wry smile, going like, "Well, welcome to the world, because you're going to get a 2-day brief. You've got 2 days to crack this. Forget the week, because you have to think laterally, because you have to think creatively, you have to work in teams. But the other thing is, and going over all the same ground we were on before, I can obviously remember I was in the same year as Keith. You had to go into a particular room, you had to pin your idea on the wall or however you, and then you had to stand up and you had to present it. You know, and I was some quite relatively shy skank from Stockport, never really stood up in front of other people to explain my ideas, knowing, because I'd seen some of my friends' ideas, knowing that they were better. That fear of God in you, sorry, Reverend Bainbridge, actually not only gave you a kick up the arse to think, next time I don't want to feel like this anymore. Yeah. I don't want to feel like her idea is better, but also explaining why you did something. I mean, it literally is. It's a world. It's our commercial world in a microcosm of a week. I don't want to overplay it, but it was the best thing we ever did, without a doubt.
I totally agree. It's absolutely. It was terrifying. It was absolutely, and it was relentless because it was 8 weeks, wasn't it? It was project after project after project. So, like Gary said, you couldn't take your foot off the gas, and you were sat there panicking, going, "Is it good enough? Is it good enough?" And I remember doing, probably hating someone like JP, because I'd spent all week trying to do something really good, and it was just so average. And I put all that effort in, and it wasn't about the effort; it was about the idea. And again, that's the moment that you go, right, I kind of start, by the end of it, you start to get it, and you realize that that's what you're doing. But like just to touch on what Gary said, it is all about being able to talk about your work. It's about being able to explain what you've done, why you've done it, to a bunch of people in the room. And however uncomfortable it is, it's part of the job, and you have to do it. And you still to this day, you get nervous. and you get
Oh,
one.
yeah, of course you do.
Never
I mean, yeah, not everyone's going to be a creative director, but our role now is about choosing what we think is the best idea. The
Yeah.
problem when you're actually faced with it, you probably have 10, 15, 20 ideas, and you've had to choose one to put on the wall. Now, it could be that actually you cocked up and you chose the wrong one. You could have actually left those pencils in that paper bag on the floor and think it was good enough because it didn't take any effort. But
Yeah.
you know, that's a skill. That's a skill as well. Anyway, sorry,
Yeah,
I'm
well-
overdoing it.
But one mistake I always made was I used to draw things beautifully. I used to spend hours drawing it, painting it. There was absolutely rubbish idea. I didn't know what it was about. So I couldn't even present it properly. I was just going, da-da, doesn't it look lovely? And then never understood why I got low marks all the time until the penny dropped, as you said.
Well, you were probably polishing something that I can't mention.
I was, but I didn't realise because it looks so nice.
But that comes back to the philosophy thing, doesn't it? The whole point of the short time is you haven't got really time to execute something to the nth degree.
Yeah.
So it's about an idea and basically not messing around with it and getting it out there. So I suppose it kind of forced you
Yes.
to try and do quick things.
So if I'd seen somebody presenting 2B pencils, I would have just said that is complete cheating. I wouldn't have got it.
But that was part of the 1 week project. You know, the idea that had been scribbled on the back of a cigarette packet and pinned to the wall that got a better result than somebody had spent hours doing it.
Exactly.
Was basically so. Well, you know, it's not about the craft of it at this moment in time. It's about the ideas. I mean, the craft will come, obviously, but it's about the winning an ideas 1 week project thing. It's about thinking. It's about getting your ideas down. But it's one of the reasons why we still have them, because they still work. You know what I mean? Because people always say to me, "Are you still doing them 1 week projects?" You know what I mean? And when you meet people years later, and you go, "Yes, we are." So you know, and long may they continue. It's just trying to write them, constantly change them slightly with the same outcome, which is a difficult thing. So if you have any ideas for 1 week projects, they will be gratefully received.
Hallelujah.
But
I don't want to presume to prompt questions, but I mean it'd be interesting to see what others who are tuning in, what they think. I mean, it's obviously, again, we're looking back at, you know, through to some degree rose tinted glasses because we've all done, you know, okay in our industry, and I do think they had an influence. I mean, do they still feel relevant? I mean, you know, John, it was a perfect question.
Well, it's one of those things that because when I studied, I wasn't given that opportunity. I studied at Edinburgh College of Art back in late 80s, and we didn't have anything like that. And so when I was confronted with them when I first started at Preston, it was an eye opener for me as well as to how to introduce creative thinking in a kind of fun way, which didn't feel too precious and kind of gave, you know, everybody the opportunity, all the students the opportunity to really kind of pitch their ideas and for people to start to learn from it. So, you know, I've found it brilliant, and I still find it incredibly relevant, you know, because it's starting people to think laterally rather than literally. And it's, if you can get that, then, you know, the rest will follow, really.
I think that, you know, first years listening, you know what I mean. I was thinking you maybe don't quite know what you've just done. Second years maybe beginning to realise it, but by the time you get to third and fourth year, you look back at those 1 week projects, you begin to understand why you've done them. You know what I mean? So I think for everybody listening who's in the first and second year, you probably just heard a really good explanation of why you've just done those projects not more than a year or a year and a half ago, because they'll never leave you. And as Harriet pointed out in her first talk, on Thursday, you know, she got a job off the back of a 1 week project, and you know, those things just stay in your portfolio sometimes because you just get them like that, and otherwise you wouldn't put them in. They either go in or they don't. Do you know what I mean? But should we move on that?
Yes.
Yeah. We're on to technology now, the dreaded technology. I'll just share share my screen. Sorry, guys. So I'm just going. It's good to go in and out, I think, isn't it? I think it gives it a bit of. So technology, as you can see, they're written with a biro. I written with a pen last night in Scanding. I did all these last night with a pen. So I would just put this up because basically I found this, and it's kind of like when we had to start college, from our year anyways, we had to basically get a huge list of things like 12-inch ruler, you know, masking tape, compass, this, that, and the other, you know, all the kind of tools. But really, you know, and there wasn't many. And these are some of the examples which are on 4 Points wall. Keith will talk about.
It was really funny just when you showed us that list, and we did Neil did this, one of the guys we work with, again, next Preston, your good friend, and the amount of reaction it got, I stuck this on LinkedIn, the amount of reaction it got from people going, God, yeah, remember this, remember that, and it just shows kind of how archaic it was. And it's not about, this isn't about nostalgia, but it's just, they were our tools, that's our technology at the time, and we just thought we want to celebrate it.
Keith, that's Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign.
It is, basically. All in one.
Everything you ever need.
Yeah, and because basically this sort of item arrived in around about 1988. I remember walking past a room with them in, and I didn't know what they were. And everybody sort of looked at them. And this is an early Mac. I think it had 1 megabyte. Can everybody just take that 1 megabyte of memory? This is a floppy disk. Yeah. And actually, looking back at it, I can't actually remember what they did. A lot really. You couldn't do Photoshop. There was not, but we've all got this now, haven't we? We've all got this sort of stuff, more technology on a mobile phone. But what we wanted to talk about here was technology and the fact that there's much technology in the world, but it still comes down to ideas, I suppose. I don't know. How do you want to talk about this one? Technology.
Well, I mean, with some degree, we've touched on it, haven't we? I mean, it's they're just the tools. They're tools of your trade, whether they are the scalpel blade or the, what was it, a putty rubber we had to have, and we had to have a burnisher, and we had to have, I mean, again, the flip side, trying to make it as relevant as possible for, if you're going to interview or in terms of improving your skill base, it does help to have that. No one expects you to be perfect at everything, far from it, but actually just saying I've been experimenting with this, or I've given this a go, or I've actually got my friend, it's the ability to be able to bring the thinking, the approach, your mates, the ability to actually have given it a go, I think, which is as important. So again, were we all brilliant with Bezier curves? Probably not. Were we all great at cleaning out a rotring? Probably not. But it was the fact that actually you just had to go through that rite of passage. So again, not presuming that everyone needs to be entirely literate of every possible piece of software, but actually, do you know what? Give it a go. And if you struggle with it, the fact that you've reached out to get someone to help you to do it, that's also that's with merit too, because all you're doing is you're trying to bring an idea to life. Again, it's just that simple connection.
I think the two thing is right. I think that people sometimes mix up. They think the technology is going to solve it for them, really, but it's only a tool, isn't it? It's whether it be a rotating pen or.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Gary says, and I think it is just that. However archaic our set of tools looked, they were tools to basically bring your ideas to life, and like I say, they're just very different now, and they're very advanced, and it's amazing what they can do. But you don't start with the tool. You don't start with it. You start with this little book or this pen, and you write down those ideas. You get the little scribbles down. You get it all out of your head. Then you fine tune it, and then how do you bring it to life? And it, like Gary said, I think it's an important point. You don't have to be a master of all the trades, of all the skills, of all of the pieces of software out there. It's good that you can do it. If you've got an understanding, that's great. But if you can get people to help you, if you can bring in other illustrators, photographers, typographers, whatever it is, to bring it to life, as long as you've got that idea, then it is you're in the right place to start.
I think Keith, you hit the nail on the head. Really, it's just not going to use that tool too soon. So it's very, very tempting, especially if you haven't got much time, to go, oh, I haven't got much time, I better just crack on and do something. But unless you do the thinking first, unless you do the scribbling, the drawing, the doodling, getting all your ideas out, self-selecting and going, oh, actually, that's a cracking idea. Now I'll go and use the tool and make it look good. It's just making sure you don't go to the computer too soon, because there's nothing worse than a blank screen. That's not very inspiring. So come up with your ideas, get you thinking, make your choices, and then use the tool to make it look good.
Yeah, it's the ideas.
There's probably a time. I mean, there's a slight twist on that to some degree, which is I think we all get comfort, to JP's point, or we all get the nervousness of the blank page. I'm not sure if that was a blank page on your wall, Keith, but and it just feels much more comforting. when you just pulled in loads of stuff from the internet, and it just kind of feels rich. I've got a brief to answer. I've got an idea, and it feels easier. So what we force all of our designers to do with any brief is, before you design anything, everyone has to get involved with the brand audit. So brand audit, and sometimes, and we get paid to do this as well, but we try and get every designer who's briefed on a job to do this. So basically, you hold your breath, dive in. We're rebranding an airline at the moment. Well, I want to know that you know, as a designer, everything about low-cost airlines across Southeast Asia, right? And you've got about 4 hours, right? Go. And so basically, they're pulling all this stuff together, and you get this massive kind of mood board, and it all feels great because it's just full of loads of stuff. But what's helping is they're visually now stimulated of what's already out there, what already everyone else has done. So now you do exactly the opposite, right? Get rid of all that. Start with a white piece of paper. I mean, actually, we do say, listen, start thinking with a piece of paper, start thinking with a pencil or a pen, because you're better informed. It's really quite hard just to kind of go. I mean, look, even here, I've got a pad next to me. It's quite hard to go, right, start drawing an idea. So again, it's the biggest cliche. You'll hear it from every tutor, and it's a bit like, oh, here we go. Andy's going on about like drawing in our sketchbooks again, sort of keys. It does help, but fill your brain with loads of stuff, and then just park it, and then go, right, now I've seen all that stuff, where do I go? It is the cliche, but honestly, here we go again. But honestly, it really does help. Really does help.
Okay. Do we move on to the last one?
Can do.
And this one could put the fear of God up everybody.
Oh no!
The crits. And just for a little bit of background, this is the room to 217, which unfortunately doesn't exist anymore. But for the students listening, 217 was where the photocopies are now on the second floor. So they knocked it through in a couple of. The room is still there in essence, but it's been knocked through into a bigger room. But this
the product or an interior design room now.
Yeah. But everybody knows, everybody from our era, probably up until the early 2000s, remembers 217, because that was the room that you were extracted out of the studios to pin your work on the wall. And it's only quite a small room, thinking about it. And there's about 30.
And then you all had to leave the room and hover around outside whilst the tutors had a really good look at it all and discuss it.
Well, and just to add to it, I mean, I'm not sure, Keith, you must have felt it was actually the room that we were interviewed in.
Yes,
to get to Preston. So I mean, it's the room where it's just a room full of sweat, as far as I can remember.
It was a room full of sweat.
It's fear, sweat and fear, isn't it? It just, even now, I can feel the kind of goosebumps on my arms going, oh my God, because it put you on that spot. And we've touched on it already about the crit and about explaining your work. But yeah, but you had to do it.
Sorry, Keith, it's also a deadline.
Yeah.
The introduction to deadlines. So this little chat now in the next few minutes is about presentation and deadlines, and not being afraid about standing up and talking about your work. I know that Gary had mentioned it slightly, but maybe we could expand upon that a little bit. The importance of it.
Well, you can't not do it. that's the bottom line. You can't not present your work. You don't end up doing this for a job if you can't talk about what you've done. Whether it's with your colleagues, whether it's with, clients. You can't not turn up and say, we haven't done anything, or I don't really fancy standing up and presenting it. You have to do it. But the other thing is, it clearly doesn't, might come naturally, but it's not something that just suddenly works. It's like anything. I don't know, if you've got a guitar, you don't go up on stage and play in front of thousands of people. You practice. So your presentation, like your creative work, is about practice, and you learn, and you never get out of that fear. There's always a little bit of something, that little bit of, am I doing this right? That little bit of imposter syndrome. Do I know what I'm talking about? But you've got to put yourself in that, and it's that outside of your comfort zone. And I think there's always got to be a little bit of that. And that talk about the 1 week briefs. That's part of it. It was that Friday in that room.
I wonder, this is a question as much for everyone who's on the call. So I don't like doing dummy run-throughs of an entire presentation, and actually timing, because I think there's a degree of spontaneity. But prior to any major presentation, I will have run through it. Here's the idea. I will have run through it in my own mind, and I will have presented it to some poor unsuspecting designer in the studio or one of my co-founders. I used to do that, and I've done that with you, Keith, when we were there, and my flatmates and that sort of stuff. I do wonder how many people do practice that. So you just got your flatmates. I've had an idea, and do you mind if I just talk you through it? Because that exercise of talking through your idea will just get your mind in such a way. Because I know I shouldn't have mentioned that bit. I should have mentioned that afterwards. I've gone on the wrong direction. Because we're a commercial. This is an applied art, not a fine art. You've got a client who, as soon as you hit industry, you'll have a client who'll be more nervous about you than you are of them in terms of graphic design, because you're trained, you've got this degree, you've got this dark arts, and they haven't he's going to present 3 ideas, or she's going to present 4 ideas. I don't know which one's the right one. So you have to kind of explain the idea and help them along the way. Oh, sorry. Anyway, back to I'll turn it into a question. I do wonder how many people do practice, because it's worth doing.
No, it's about being organised and prepared. Yeah. And if you need a trial run, do a trial run.
I would have thought very few people at first year, second year, maybe by third year they do. I mean, again, time management, well, if you've just come up with it the night before and you've not had time to talk to anybody about it the first time you put it on the wall.
No, of course.
The opportunity. But I think it's a really good tip for anybody listening. Still is to actually practice with your friends, you know what I mean, and say, what do you think of this?
It is, and I think as well what it does is it helps you realise where all the holes in your project are as well. If you talk through it from start to finish, people will pick up on that as well. If you're talking to somebody who doesn't know the project, if you've got a gaping hole, they'll say, well, I don't understand how you got from there to there. Can you explain that a little bit more? And it'll help you make more sense of the project as well. So I think it helps in so many different ways.
It's a skill like anything else, and you don't pick up a skill by not doing it. And the only way is to get back on the horse and just practice. And you're right, even if you're doing it in your head to yourself. But yeah, if you can do it in front of another person, because eventually you will have to go and do that. And speaking of presentations, I'm really sorry, Andy, but as I mentioned, I've got a presentation right now, so I'm afraid
you're going to have to go.
Yes.
Thank you very much for having me. And I'm sorry I can't answer any questions, but yeah, happy to answer them later at another date. But thank you, everybody.
Cheers,
Good luck with your
Bye.
Cheers, fella.
Thank you. Bye.
He doesn't know. I forgot you were going. I forgot he was going. Yeah, don't worry. It's Keith and Gary and Rachel will.
I mean, just add to what Gary was saying as well, and I think we said at the beginning about the crit stuff. You can't not do it, and I think what I've really enjoyed is setting the briefs for the students. But what still gets me go is when students have done that brief and they don't rack up and they don't turn up and show and walk through even just those early ideas. Even if you're not sure, even if you haven't got anything written down, come and talk to us. Present your thinking, even just having a chat. But no show, you can't no show. It doesn't work. You don't do any work ever if you no show.
The worst thing you can do is bury your head in the sand.
Yeah.
Or just turn over. I'm not going to go in because I've got nothing to show. I'm scared.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, you've got to remember that everybody is in the same boat. Everybody gets nervous. And it just comes with experience of just putting yourself in that situation and doing it. Yeah. You can avoid it and not do it, but then it just makes the situation worse.
Do you still get a little bit nervous, Keith, Gary, when you have to present to a big client?
Yes, always. And I think the difference is you have that self-doubt. Again, as a creative, I think there's always that element of self-doubt. Have I done the right thing? The imposter syndrome. Do I actually know what I'm talking about? And the nerves. And I think the key thing is, if you don't have any of those things, you're too complacent. But equally, what you shouldn't do is let those things consume you, that you're so nervous that you can't talk, that you doubt yourself so much that you don't believe in what you're doing. So I think that the all you do is learn how to manage it. You learn how to manage the nerves. You learn that, yeah, maybe I've been doing this for a while, so I kind of must know what I'm doing. And eventually that comes with confidence. But I always believe a little bit of self-doubt, a little bit of nerves, a little bit of questioning things is a good thing. Just don't let it consume you.
Yeah. But also, sometimes it's just that anticipation. And once you get started, it's no problem at all. It's just making that start with it.
Like going to the dentist. Never as bad, really. But the other thing is deadlines as well. The important thing about criticism, you're given a set amount of time to do something. Everybody knows in advance that it's 3 o'clock. Get there early, put it up. A deadline is a deadline, and also in industry, deadlines are incredibly important. Your life is ruled by the deadline, isn't it? From a day-to-day basis, time.
You've got to be professional.
Do you want to talk about that deadlines, guys, or not quickly? I mean,
deadline's a drop-dead deadline. I mean, it's you can't not turn up. Keith's already mentioned it. I mean, that's the world we live in. It's a commercial. I mean, it is what you're getting paid to do, and you invariably don't have enough time. I can almost guarantee it. So in that regard, it's what. And by the way, we're talking about deadlines. We're talking about end presentations. Again, when you hit the commercial world, we deliberately put loads of little deadlines in. We're going to have catch-ups every. I need to see how it's going. We need to see how it's going. You need to talk to a strategist. You need to. And it's constantly deadline driven. And does that mean sometimes but you don't know when the idea is going to come up. As JP said, 2 minutes before the crit, it could be the cliche. It's when you're in the bar. I mean, you don't know when the good idea is going to hit you. Yeah. But all you end up doing is learning those tricks of handling your own creativity of when those things happen. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think going back to the deadline, if you didn't have a deadline, well, what would you do? You just carry on and you just keep working it to death and working it to death and working it to death.
Or not working it.
Yeah. So a deadline, whether it's a client deadline or just a personal one or a university one, it's there for a reason. Because if you've got nothing to focus on, how are you going to ever get things to a state where they're ready to kind of discuss or share or do whatever? So you kind of need them, and I know I need them. That often the longer time, the worse. If you've got that deadline, it drives you to get things done. Ultimately.
Yeah, it's about time management. It's all about organising and just breaking things down into manageable chunks. If it looks too massive a mountain to start with, then just break it down into little bits that you can get done.
Yeah, really good advice.
I think on that note, deadline-wise, I think we might have reached our own deadline questions-wise.
We got through it, Andy.
Well, it's not necessarily the end of the sermon, but we're going to have tea and biscuits in a minute. So I'm going to. Am I sharing? We're not sharing, are we? Yet? Well, it's question time. I think maybe. Do you think it's time for a couple of questions?
Yeah, Nick's got his hand up.
Yeah, hi guys. Thanks for that. It's really informative. I just wanted to ask you. For obviously like final years now that are going to be graduating and trying to get into the industry, sort of advice would you give to us in terms of coming into the industry where everyone's sort of working remotely at the moment and we're unable to get that feel for a studio and the way that they work and have that confidence that we're on the right track when we start working on a project?
Yeah, it is a tough one, isn't it? Because we were having a debate about whether we shared images and things of our studios and stuff like that. And it's a bit like kind of it's a bit of a sadness because we're not in them, and a bit like rubbing it in because you're not in them either. And I think for me, it's tough when you're working essentially in a bubble. I'm on my own here. So even just calls like this, you've got to make an effort. You need to get people in the same place, as in on screen, chat, and work through ideas and bounce things off, because working in the bubble is really difficult and you don't genuinely do it because you're usually sat at a desk and you're turning around going, what do you think of that? Or what do you think of this? Or I've just thought of that, or show me what you're doing. So you've got to you need to try and pass your ideas to other people and get feedback and keep that going, whether it's just bouncing stuff off a call like this and just sharing things, because it is hard to make decisions when you're in isolation.
Yeah.
Got one from Gary. Gareth, as someone who's about to graduate, is there anything different you're looking out for in graduates to stand out from the crowd in these current times? Are you looking for anything different in graduates or not?
That's to me?
I don't know, really.
Yeah.
Have you got a good Zoom face?
No. It's really hard, isn't it? It's really hard. It's really hard. I mean, it goes back to the connections. So how do you stand out, and how do you make sure that people, I mean, other than actually obviously interviewing and chatting to people face to face, that's the key thing. It's all about the connection. You're far more likely to read an email or pick up a communication if it's from someone who's linked to someone who you know or something. Now, clearly, honesty is always the best policy, but failing honesty, just try and blag it. You know, you've met someone, spoken to someone. You know, I was talking to Keith up at 4 Point. He suggested I called. I mean, obviously, I can't. I mean, honestly,
What you just going there, Gary?
Just blame Keith. No, but seriously, the point I'm trying to make is that try and make those connections. There is no killer. There's no killer solution to this.
No.
First of all, by the way, apologies on behalf of the entire industry if people have written to people and they don't get the response that they should. Everyone deserves a response. They do. But at the moment, there's thousands. There's obviously lots of communications and emails. And what you need to do, like I say, is just make some form of link or connection that suddenly feels human. Then it doesn't just, because the problem is the awful thing. It often even doesn't come down in these COVID times. It doesn't even come down to your work sometimes, because if you get 20 or 30 graduate or intern applications and you flick through them, all you need is that one bit of the nugget. That's all you need. That one connection. It goes back right to the start of what we were mentioning before.
Yeah. I would totally agree with what Gary's saying there. It's about being a human being. If you want equality, it's so easy just to have to be some sort of robot or just have, you know, a work that's just on a screen. I want a human being. I want somebody that can have a conversation, somebody you can work with, who's a decent human being, who can actually answer the phone and speak to somebody else and explain what they're doing. You've got to have the skills to do the job, but being able to build relationships and bring something to the party, and that's quite hard to show in a portfolio or show even on a Zoom call. But the relationship and the network thing, I think Gary's spot on with that, because however right or wrong it is, it's just how it is. And I think every industry is like that to a degree. And even the work that we do, Gary, we talked about it last night, that the work that we do for clients, you work with a client, you do a great job, the client might move on. Then they come back to you, oh yeah, I worked with you before, so I'd like to work with you again. Or Gary goes, oh, you should work with these guys. They know their stuff. It's recommendation, it's network, it's just in a different sphere. It's in the sphere of clients. So I think building that network and making those relationships, and sometimes they take a while, don't they? It's you know, you don't suddenly just have a conversation and it happens. It could be a slow burner.
Well, the one other thing that we always, I mean, we try and respond to everyone. The one that's often a killer. I mean, Simon Manchip, who's one of my co-founders, he always responds to these. Is everyone who writes to us claims to know that they know our work because they've had a quick look at our website, which is fine, I mean, which takes moments. The ones that really do stand out are the ones who said, actually, I really like your project you did for this. I just thought I'd give it a go too. Here's some thoughts. I haven't even dropped him up in my, you know, this is not my CV, this is not my work, but I've had a thought. Actually, probably the world's hardest brief I've ever given to anyone in Preston that Ellie and Connor actually looked at, which is that UK Parliament. One candidate wrote to us ages ago and said, listen, I really like that. I thought it was really quite, you know, I've given it a go. And you can't help but just go, well, then we've got to have a chat. We've got to have a chat. You know, would you mind talking me through what you think of this work? Because again, it just feels, it goes back to that point you were making before, Keith, but it just feels human. It feels like you've actually taken the time to give it a go. And what's great is you go, well, actually, the idea you ended up with probably isn't as good as the idea. There's a sketch in your first idea on that PDF. That was bloody brilliant. That's probably better than the idea that we did. I mean, so that's another tip, which again, and it means work. It means work on top of what you're given at uni, at college. But honestly, it's worth it. And does that mean you have to do about 5 or 10 projects to go to? Sadly, yes. But I mean, it's always been useful. I mean, I'm not even sure if Ellie's on this call, but you know, her work and Connor's work was really good. I mean, exceptional for UK Parliament. And Ellie, when she presented, I mean, you could go, actually, do you know what? I could literally lift you up now and stick you straight in front of a client, and the job's done. I mean, it was at that level. Like I said, she's probably going to message me now and telling me to shut up.
But that goes back to what you were saying about presentation, Gary, and you know that ability to be able to talk through as well as to present it. You're right. She was, you know, when she left, she was almost a finished package in some respects.
Yeah. Look, understood the challenge, understood the problem, came up with a good idea, presented it, and amazingly well. So again, if you follow that same logic when you're applying, treat applying for a job like your 1 week project.
Yeah.
Treat it like a project. Come up with an idea. I'm going to take one of the projects. I'm going to give it a bit of a twist. I challenge you not to write back to me because I've put some time in, you miserable bugger. Write back to me.
It's about standing out.
Yeah, I think it is, but like Gary said, I think I scribbled something down here. We were again chatting the other night about it. It's like treat your projects like a when you do maths and you got the answer and the answer's 14. Well, you get a mark for getting the answer right, but you get more marks for showing your workings out. So for me, I want to know how you got there. So it's not just the answer, because in our job there's more than one answer. There's not just 14. It might be 11. It might be 53. But I don't really care what the answer is. In a way, I want to know how you got there.
That's a really nice way to
the way I can explain, because there isn't a right answer. And I think just going back to the question, that's what would make the work stand out. Seeing the scribbles, like I tried to show before with that core bank thing, it just shows you your thinking, shows you how you got there.
Yeah, it's telling the story, because when you're presenting your work, the person you're presenting to doesn't know the background, doesn't know what your idea is. You've got to explain it.
Yeah. Well, Gary said about context before, and that's exactly right. You're putting everything into context.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, that was an incredibly long answer to a simple question.
Good answer. Somebody waiting. Carolis has got a question, I believe.
Yeah, hello. Lovely talk and lovely pieces of advice. Really enjoyed this one. Now, the question I have is a bit, I guess, more specific due to the fact that I don't really have much experience in the industry. I'm still a first year. But my question is regarding working with a client already, not catching their attention, but already working with a client. The job is, I guess, finished, but they reply with some question basically about the edits they want done. Now, I understand the edits, let's say, but what troubles me, I've had this, I guess, it already happened with me, but the trouble for me is I don't, let's say, agree with the edits. My creative vision for the project is different. I do understand the target audience as well as the client itself. I didn't misinterpret that, but I guess there's a different feel to the edits that they suggested compared to mine. So kind of the previous answer, I guess, answered a little bit of this question, sort of be a human, still question that, but I'm still curious on what can you say about this?
Yeah. Wow, that's the ultimate question, isn't it? We've all been there.
Over to you two.
All been there.
I mean, the challenge there is it's a balance. I don't know what you'd say, Keith. It's a balance. So sometimes you will have in reverse order, it's the client that's paying. And they're inviting you in to do their plumbing. And if they decide to tell you that they don't want the plumbing done like that and they want it done incorrectly, it doesn't matter how much you push back. If they want that done that way, sooner or later, that's what's going to happen. And we are in a commercial environment. It's an applied art, not a fine art. So there have been times when we have had to take a design vision that we've had and it has to be watered down. It's sad. It's not ideal. It's not what you want. We're certainly not driven by awards, although I think collectively we've all won many. It shouldn't be driven by that. It should be driven by solving a problem. And the annoying bit is if you think it's not actually answering the problem anymore. What you're asking me to do now is not answering the question that I thought you asked. So you push back when you think there is logic. It goes back to that context. Providing you can say this is the problem you've given us. This is the world that's out there. I mean, no piece of creative lands in a vacuum, in of itself. None of our work ever gets presented on a white background in a gallery. It's under lots of pressures. But providing you can show the context and explain why you want it to be this colour, doesn't work. Doesn't work for these reasons. Providing you can actually walk them through that, you can invariably, the majority of the time, you can convince them because we're the experts. That's why you're hiring us. But has there been times when you just had to let it go? Yeah. Sadly, yes. And you end up with this slightly annoying thing where you kind of let a little bit go here, but you win a small battle there. It irks you. You know it could have been amazing. But yeah, I mean, sorry. Again, it's probably one of the questions we face on every job.
Yeah, and I bought this book recently. It's about Nike. Lovely book. It's put together, and it's just all about their innovations. And there's just a little statement at the beginning. And they just say it's about progress, not perfection. And I think that's kind of what you have to do, that not everything is going to be perfect. We have to learn to try and compromise without sacrificing our kind of, our principles. You want to do the right thing all of the time. Like Gary said, you want to stand your ground, and, as long as you can explain and justify, but also you've got to go, all right, I'm not going to win this battle, so I'll make it as good as it can. It won't be perfect, but it will get them to another place. It'll get them to the next level. And I think that's all you can try and do.
Would you still suggest basically taking that battle in the first place, or just letting it go from the get-go?
It's all about the relationship, isn't it?
It's all about the relationship.
All about the relationship. Gary will probably notice this. You have people that you're just not going to win that battle. There's others where you can have proper cards on the table conversation and discuss it. So I think it all depends on the relationship you've got with the people you're doing your work for.
It does. I mean, by the way, the other problem is it gets it. Sorry, no, Andy, go on.
Are you in a position to walk away? Because it's down to me.
No, it's well, I can basically say that is competition. It was lots of basically universities went into this competition is for Kenji, the company or for the plushies and everything, and it was a competition, and I won that competition, and they just want some alterations done, and those alterations I do not agree with.
Yeah. I mean, the worst thing about our industry also, probably more so, in kind of maybe the 80s, 90s, I always hated the kind of designer thing where we're perceived as being right up ourselves, basically, because we just know better than everybody. And yes, we have a skill, but I've always felt that you need to try and make the process as inclusive as possible. If you can bring people along in the journey of what you're doing, the chances are they'll be on the same page as you, and you can usually make decisions and get the direction you want. But that's, again, all about relationship, all about the people.
It is. I mean, I think on your case, an example, as case in point, what you have to do, but by the way, designers do this to us all the time as creative directors. You actually say, I think it would look better if you did this with it. I think it would make the idea better. It would look better in green in this font, for example. What you don't want is a designer going, no, not prepared to do that. What I am prepared to do is for you to actually put it in green in the font I've suggested, present it back to me and explain why it's not as good. Yes. And give me the rationale behind it, and you go, actually. So that's what you need. That's what I'd argue you need to do. You need to say, okay, I hear you, but I need to understand where your question is coming from, because the questions often aren't aesthetic. The clients that we deal with are under pressures which we often don't understand. They'll be under pressures from, finance department, making something too expensive, can't use that font, can't use illustration because it's too expensive. So if we understand where the question's coming from or their demand to your change, it's easy. It's an easier argument to say, okay, I've done what you've asked, but I still believe this is better, and I can tell you why. And here, what I've done is I've dropped my piece of creative against all of your competitors. And actually look how much more distinctive it is. Or what you've done is you've made me change this, and now look how it actually looks a bit more like this brand. So provided, with a degree of humbleness, but at the same time you're the expert. So do we get the privilege of walking away? I mean, yes, we do. And have we walked away? Yes, quite a lot of times. Probably more to do with when relationships are toxic, less to do with the actual design itself. But it's about, again, that's also a skill. That comes to a presentation skill. It comes down to understanding what people need. Sorry, Andy.
No, I've got another question. It's always a good one. Looking back at your time at...
Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Looking back at the time at design school, is there anything you regret not doing in particular, or wish you'd put more time and effort into, if you can remember that far back?
Obviously, talking to you there, Gary.
What would you have done? Anything?
I'd actually like to do it all again.
Yeah,
Knowing what I know now, let's have another go at it. I'd love all that opportunity to do things that I just don't have time to do anymore.
I don't think I can live with regrets. I think it's still, like I said at the beginning, it stays with me like it was yesterday. And I think if you change stuff, you might not be the person that you are. You might not be where you are. So I think you just got to make the most of it. That's all you say. You just got to really live for that moment. Yes, you've got a future, and yes, you've got a job and stuff, but you've got to make the most of what's there. And you have to do that. It's not going to be given on a plate. You've got to want to suck it up. You've got to want to be that sponge, be that, go out and get it.
Yeah.
And make it yours, and just make the most of every day, every chance, every opportunity. So when you come out, you don't regret it. And I think I felt I could do that, and I'm sure the other guys do too.
Yeah. One of the things was, somebody mentioned it earlier on the week. It's not going to come to you, is it? Don't sit there and expect it to come to you. I mean, you've got to, go to it, or whatever it is, and embrace it. Haven't you? You can't sit there passively waiting for something to land on your lap.
No, you can't. You've got to be prepared. No, you can't. I mean, so would I change anything? No, I probably wouldn't. I mean, I'd be interested to know how I would love to do it, to Rachel's point, do it all again, but with modern technology. I mean, I would approach it slightly differently, I think. I'd hate to think that, I mean, this is awful to say in COVID times when we're all sat in our rooms. I'd hate to think that we all ended up just sitting in our rooms on our Macs. What made it was the camaraderie, the fact that you were forced to work together. Because we didn't have the computers, we didn't have the internet. You were forced to sit in a studio and to crunch through it, which was amazing. And if you do get a chance, don't miss those hours when you get a chance to go into college. Do not miss those chances of just bumping in. Those little tiny connections. When you mention an idea to someone, I guarantee your ideas will only get plus. They'll only get better because of it. We can drive up. I'm what? Well, no, I'm old. I'm over 50. Even we struggle. Sat here on our own, trying to come up with ideas, trying to come up with brand strategies. When you're just in this kind of blinkered world, it's really hard. The more that you can connect and just, like I say, those 2-minute conversations in a hallway, in studio, that sort of stuff. Even on this, I would hate to think if we did it again now, I'd end up just sitting on my computer in the room. I think that's really.
And just to add to that, we as lecturers and staff also struggle because we love bouncing ideas off each other as well, and working with each other. And now we're in isolation as well, so it's equally as difficult for us.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, what has been nice to see is that, I know some students have been sort of setting up their own kind of mini crit groups online and bouncing ideas off. And, that shows a real sort of sense of initiative to make the best of the situation, the technology that they've got. And that's brilliant to see. And, it's a great way of making the best of a bad situation at the moment.
Yeah. And you're right. I think you have to do it. You have to do it. It's not happening to you.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Gary's point there was it wasn't everybody, but there was a sort of cohort where we racked up at 9 o'clock or whatever, and we were there till whenever we finished, and you were just there and you made that atmosphere. So it didn't just happen. You were part of it and you created it. And I think that goes for studios, that goes for work, that goes for life. You have to contribute your bit to it. You don't just sit there and kind of suck it in from what everybody else is doing.
So
what exactly? Sorry.
Well, I mean, it's that sort of thing. It comes back. I like to personally say that after this, I'd like to think that basically there will be a lot more collaboration online from the people who've been on Conference Week. Yeah. I mean, we set up a buddy group very early on in lockdown to get these sort of first years to talk to the third years and fourth years, But you can lead a horse to water, can't you? But you can't make it drink, and that still exists. And I think, again, somebody sat in the first year, sat there waiting for something to happen. Get yourself an internal group going. Do you know what I mean? Start chatting to each other. You know what I mean? And I know that some of the final years have set up a thing where they're meeting online through Teams and things like that. So, I think be proactive in trying to communicate with each other about your ideas in this situation we're in, because it won't go on forever, and we will be back in the studio, and then at some point it will be limited or not, but you'll be able to then sort of talk to people face to face. But don't wait until that point in time. Start those dialogues and conversations, relationships now.
Well, exactly. It probably makes it more relevant to the third years, I would imagine. But I mean, this is a skill that everyone needs to do, which is also, this is all very well and good. Someone who runs a company saying, and whether it's Keith saying it with Rachel, but just having that readiness for the moment when it does happen. When Tinkerbell does come over and actually starts spreading some bits of dust around, making sure that you are able to capitalise on that. So people used to laugh at me when I went into Lambinaire and say, well, Martin Lambinaire was your external tutor, external examiner, gave you a job at your degree show. You're lucky back bollocks. So well, you flip that around and go, actually, or you could argue that I just happened to have taken the opportunity when it was there. I don't remember trying to butter him up, but I was just trying to explain my ideas. It was simple as that. Because I'd gone through all that sort of stuff. Again, she's gonna kill me if she's on this call. You know, it was a bit of a shitty old brief that I gave. You know, that Parliament brief that Connor and Ellie took. But my God, you knocked it out of the park.
Yeah,
I think it was only three of them did
test.
it.
Yeah,
it was a hard. But you go, well, and there you got a job. It's as simple as that. I mean, it was those briefs that you get that are outside of college. Yeah, grab them. Tell you what, don't just do one, do two. Keith and myself we did loads of competitions. There was an RSA one that we did together or something. You do as many as you can, because you don't know what eyeball is going to look at it, because that person might employ me or give me a job in the future. Yeah, it makes it sound like hard work, but it was fun along the way.
Yeah.
God, I sound like the preacher now.
What advice would you give somebody who was maybe unsure about which industry they wanted to work into after they graduated? So I was currently an illustration student who, as a second year illustration student, how much opportunity out there is there to overlap professions, illustrating, design, advertising, design, etc.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? I mean, it's never too late. That's the other thing. Go with your passion. I mean, my son went to study. My son is now doing product design, and he went to foundation and wanted to do graphic design. Just if you think that's the way you want to, make sure you want to do it, not because you can't do what you're doing. Make sure you want to do it because that's what you want to do. It's a hard question. And by the way, I mean, Paul Wilkinson. I mean, he was in his third. I mean, he was my flatmate. The same. He was already late in his 30s or something. He's decided he didn't like what he was doing. I think he worked in a shipyard at one point. Just decided, and he does TV design, similar to what I did at Lambinaire, and is phenomenally amazing. But never did any of that at Preston. Didn't do any of it. But I think he always knew that's what he wanted to do.
Yeah, and I think it's like a filtering process. And go back to that little diagram when we were talking about the things that made impact. And I remember my school teacher, my art teacher when I was 14, Mr. Ryans, telling me without distinction that you will never make anything in this industry. You will not make a career out of anything in art and design, because he didn't, and he said it's not possible. And I thought, you know what? One, I wasn't very good, so I have to be honest. I was very average at art, so it wasn't what I excelled. But I absolutely loved it. So going back to what Gary said, you have to have a passion for something, because the job is difficult enough as it is, or any job is. But if you've got that little bit of fire in your belly that says, I really want to do it, then it'll drive you on. And I think, so as you filter down and you'll come out, get a job, it's not the end of the world or the only thing you can stick at. And I think if you go to specialisms filter and filter and filter, and eventually you'll find your way to that point. So I think you will get there, but I don't think you necessarily need to go straight out there and go, right, I'm just going to do this and that's all I'm going to work on.
Yeah, that leads on to something else that was said on earlier in the week as well, Keith, I think, which, we're talking about, do you have to be the best? You don't have to be the best. There are very, very few people out there that can just make it seem effortless. It really is about the graft, and if you're prepared to put the graft in, you'll make it. Don't feel that you have to be this kind of exceptional being that just produces this incredible work over and over again. It is about putting the graft in.
Totally agree. And I'm going to say this about Gary, because I was Gary when we were at Preston was always like, I felt like everything looked really easy for Gary. And I felt I always had to work hard in order to be at Gary's level. But to be honest, that's just a perception. But I think if you take anything like footballers or whatever, there's those that are just naturally talented. They'll go out and they just do that, and you go, bloody hell, that's amazing. But when they get to the point where they actually have to work hard and have the talent, it's really tricky because they're not used to grafting. But if you're a grafter with a little bit of talent, if you keep pushing that through, you will just be able to see that through. And I think the graft, for me, talent is important, but you've got to have that mindset of being willing to graft and willing to put the hours in and the hard work in. It doesn't just happen. It might look easy. That's the other thing. People make it look easy, and that's the challenge. That's the difficulty.
Yeah, don't give up.
Nah, don't give up.
I think also, I mean, off the top of my head, and you probably also do the same. There's so many people who might have graduated in illustration or graphic design, and they've gone on to do so many different things within the field of the creative industry. So they might not necessarily have become creative graphic designers, but they've gone into strategy, or they've moved over into packaging, or then ended up in I don't know, curating a museum or something. Really.
There's so much more opportunity as well. Different directions to
Well, it's
go
that
in.
ability to solve problems, which gives you that kind of ability to be a lot more flexible as well, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. But I think the other thing is, at 14, I had no clue what my career prospects were going to be. I didn't go, that's what I'm going to be. I'm going to be a director of a design agency. You know, hell, you just you sort of take the next step. You get onto the next step of the ladder. You do the next qualification, or in my case, you scrape by to do just enough because you couldn't do any more. You did your best, but it was just enough to get to the next step, and then things start to unfold. Like Gary said, opportunities arise, coincidences or meetings, or the network pops up, and you've got to grab those things and do something with them.
I mean, that's a really good. I mean, John. By the way, Keith, I actually thought it was opposite around. I was trying to keep up with you. But the point that John's making, it's so right. I mean, I'm not sure if anyone on this call has those self-doubts. Every single one of us has those self-doubts, and I can tell you now, the second that you leave and you will get a job, you don't have to be the best, but I can tell you what will happen is you'll be put in a studio and you'll be surrounded by some absolutely seriously exciting and frightening quality. You just will, and you'll feel slightly humbled by it, and long may that continue, because if you do the skill and draw in from those people. But the amount of people I've met, I've come up against, I've pitched against agencies, and I've walked in there, and there's ex-Preston mates in there. Some you win, some you lose, but actually, again, you get to the position where you actually don't even, I almost don't mind losing as much as I did when I was younger, because you have that degree of respect, and you just know that actually you can't win every race. It's just not the way it works. And by the way, the other flip side of that is often the client, and this is my get out of jail card, often the client doesn't even know what the best idea is anyway. So we should not beat ourselves up. I mean, literally, you do not have to be exceptional at everything in order to get on in this business.
Yeah.
You just put the graph question. Yeah, sorry, makes it sound grim, but you've got to put the hours in.
Yeah. And I think a good point there, you made a really good point, Gary, is you want to be surrounded by people that are better than you, because you want don't use it as like intimidation. Use it as kind of, I want to improve and I want to get better. And still to this day, that's what we do. We're all surrounded in our business by people that are better than us in different ways, and that's what makes things tick. So not everybody is better than you at everything, but there's that combination of that team that that person is really good at these kind of idea generation, or somebody that's great at typographical or illustrative or strategic stuff, and that's what you learn from them, and you improve what you do. And that's the buzz. Use that as a buzz and as a way to learn more, not as a kind of a stick to beat yourself with.
Yeah, good point.
Team as well, the word team, you keep mentioning team, don't you? Team is working within a team. Everybody brings a little bit of something to the table. It's a team game. It's not an individual thing, is it? So,
but you have to bring your bit.
Yes.
You don't sit and wait for other people to do it. You've got to do your bit, and it is hugely important. There's very rare, Gary will say this, and Rachel as well, you very rarely in complete isolation doing a project ever.
Otherwise, you just find yourself on the bench very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then on the transfer list, and
that's
down
it.
leagues,
playing non-league, and that's you done.
Sorry.
I don't know if we have any more questions. Does anybody have anything they want to ask?
That's a no.
Oh, yeah.
I just want to say hi to Keith and Gary.
Dave Dowding. Hello, mate. You all right?
Yeah, good.
Excellent.
I don't think my camera's working though, because I haven't got Teams installed.
No, you'll still be a handsome devil. Don't worry about it.
It's a lot grayer.
You're gonna out handsome us.
Was Dave in your year?
Yeah.
I'll probably know Dave.
Yeah, get the picture up. Find the picture.
Get the picture up. Dave is he's here.
Dave took some of these pictures.
There's Dave.
Yes, where's the?
Oh, look.
I remember Dave.
See? But Dave, you took a couple of those photographs that we shared there, didn't you?
Yeah, I think they were from a trip to Amsterdam, weren't they? The black and white ones.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I found them in an old folder at the start of lockdown when I was
there you go. Yeah.
Bored. So I thought I'd scan them all in.
Yeah, that's behind the camera, obviously.
Yes, always behind the camera,
But actually,
trying to avoid the limelight.
but what I just everybody knows as well, what Dave has got great talent at. I always remember you doing illustration work and photography as well. You're a great designer as well, but your kind of aptitude towards things like photography and illustration, I remember, inspired me when we were sort of at Poly together, and I think that made you realise what else you could do. And going back to the question about following a particular path, you can still have those abilities, and it comes, they're always useful. And I remember some of the stuff you introduced me to illustrators and photographers and music and all sorts of stuff, and that's the kind of stuff that sticks in your head, and it still stays with me.
Yeah, I think my problem was always my attention span.
It is hard, I must admit. Project-wise, that is difficult, isn't it? Especially in the client world, where projects very rarely, you have a lot of deadlines, but they can go on for months and months, and you're coming back to revisit and coming back to visit. So yeah, trying to hold your attention is a tricky one.
Yeah. Well, it's lovely to hear you chatting, guys. Anyway.
Yeah, we'll have to catch up soon.
So good to hear your voice, man.
And there's Rachel as well. I can see Rachel.
If anybody's wondering who that is, that's Dave from Gary and Keith's show. It's nice to see you, Dave.
Nice to see you too, Andy.
Yeah, cheers.
Keeping the faith.
Keeping the faith, yeah.
It's where we began, wasn't it? All about network.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay.
Another hand? No. I don't know. Yeah. Have we come to the end of the conference week, you think? Or?
Well, it's. I don't think there's many more questions out there at the moment.
No.
I mean, I think this has been a fantastic way to round the week off. It's kind of, it's sort of focused everything that's been talked about, and I think, as a conference week, it's been staggeringly good. And I think, not only the presentations, but also the kind of conversations that have happened afterwards as well, on just about all the talks has been, I think, really valuable.
I think we did all right in the end, didn't we, guys? We did a little bit of practice on that. Took quite a few Zoom meetings to get round to that, but reining me in last night on my extra long presentation. I just like to say thank you.
And applaud, and hats off to I mean, doing this during lockdown. It sounds easier because it's all done on this, but it's not. It's much harder.
Yeah.
Hats off for that.
Yeah, well done.
Hopefully it's given everybody a bit of a lift for the next few weeks anyways, going forward. A lot to, it's all recorded anyways, there's a lot to reflect on as well, isn't it? So that's
very good.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, thanks to you two guys as well for today, and to JP as well, obviously. But I really appreciate your input and your time today as well.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it.
No problem at all.
Yeah, it's been good seeing you again.
Exactly. Yeah, it should have been face to face.
Another year.
Next year.
That has been good.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, I think, just to round, I think a good round of applause for Keith and Gary and JP as well.